Hi everyone, Eric Lucero here once again, Architectural Photography Tutorials. Today we are going to go over a living room shot that I've done that has a couple different challenges than we've worked on in previous videos. I'm going to take you through a full tutorial here from Capture One into Photoshop, and then we'll go back into Capture One at the end to finish it off. So this will be a longer one, but hopefully there's some good things you can get out of it and show you some challenges that we had that are a little bit different than other shots. So here's the shot we're going to be working on. It's a living room image that I did. I shot this at about 32 millimeters. You're going to notice it's not as wide as a typical shot would be for a room like this. I'm trying to just tell the story in a little bit tighter space, so we can get a little bit more placed into the shot than we would if it was just a wide shot showing a bunch of ceiling and a bunch of floor. So as you can see, here's the room the other direction. There's windows over on this side, and I have this shot in conjunction with it, so it worked to do this angle and get a little bit more intimate and show the space while we're still showing this cool architecture on the stairway. This is for a production builder, so I'm able to take a couple different angles to show their product off here. So I've got these shots. As you can see, I've taken the liberty to do quite a large crop on these if you look in here. So I like to teach people that don't be afraid to crop on your images. You can always export them. There's enough information there that you can lose a lot of the ceiling. This was a vertical shot, and you can see how much of this I've cropped out to make into a square image. And when we're all done with it, it comes out to this beautiful looking framed image. Even though in camera it probably didn't look that way. It's why I like to use Capture One, is because I can shoot it and I can see exactly what I'm getting in with my crop and my adjustments right away. So on this particular shot, I didn't do too much in the way of adjustments, just a couple little sliders here. I didn't do any layers or anything, so everything's pretty natural to the way we shot it here. So I started off with my strobe layers, again went into the lights and turned those on and off, and then we went into ambience the same way I typically shoot every shot, just the simple method of ambience, strobes, and lights all separately shot. So those are all exported, and I've got them here in Bridge, and they are ready to load into Photoshop layers. So once these get in here, again, I kind of use the same method all the time where I put them into their own folders. I can put the action again for those folders on our site there. If you want to download them, you can assign custom buttons to them. I use a loop deck here, which I can assign those custom functions to any of these buttons on here. It just makes my workflow a little bit faster. I'm used to it doing it that way, but you can do it as simple as using your keyboard here and assigning it to the F buttons up top. Again, those actions I have preset in here, and I can send those to you guys to download, and you can assign your own buttons to them. I'm not going to go through finding them here in all my actions, but as you can see, we just go my window layers. I will put into a window folder. My lights I'll put into a light folder, and my strobes remaining will all go into a strobe layer. And I'm just going to rearrange these. Oops. So they're in this order: strobe, windows, lights. And we're going to go to our first one here. And this is kind of our base layer. It might be a little bit brighter than I want, so I'm going to move it up, and we're going to start with a little bit dimmer layer here. And what I'm going to do is turn on that brighter one, and I'm just going to turn that into a lighten layer and put a mask on it. Again, I have a hot button set up for that, but all I did was add a layer mask down here. Holding the option button turns it black, and then switching the blending mode up here to lighten, if you haven't done that before. These blending modes are pretty useful, and we'll try to teach you a lot about them here within the tutorials, but lighten's a good one to use if you are not too used to it. What it does is it'll only paint the brighter pixels, and not throwing anything darker from below. So right now I'm on 100% opacity. That's a little too much. I'm going to go down to 40% opacity, and I'm just going to paint in some of these brighter features in here, brighten up that. Again, I don't want to brighten the whole image because I want the attention to be on these furnishings, this artwork, and this staircase. There's no reason to brighten a bunch of the floor or ceiling because it's not the focal point of my shot. So I think this looks pretty good. Again, there's with it off, here's with it on. As you can see, it brightened up a good portion of the shot. And I do have a darker exposure here. Again, I do my main exposure, which is probably this one, and I do 2/3 brighter and 2/3 darker, just so I have them. I might use this darker layer here just to blend some of the blooming out of where this silk is. So I've removed the silk on this shot, and I'm going to zoom in here just so you can kind of see how I had the silk up in this window. Oops. I tried to make sure I folded everything up and kept it contained within this window frame, knowing that I was going to have to blend it out for this shot. So as you can see, as I turn it on and off, it's taking out quite a bit, or it takes out that whole silk, and you can see where I am with the strobe over here, just kind of lighting this up so it's easier to blend. So I'm going to turn that on, and I'm going to put a mask on this, and it's going to keep as a normal layer. And I'm just going to go at 100% here, and I'm going to mask out this whole silk. And I'm not going to be too concerned about the window frame here right now. I'm going to get rid of some of this, but I want to make sure I'm keeping my trees in there. And I'll show you why I'm a little loosey-goosey with this here later, because we do have our ambient layers, which are going to pull a little bit of this in, this light. But I just want to make sure that silk's 100% out of there. I do have a brighter layer here that I'm going to turn on just to get this feeling a little bit more like the rest of the shot and what I've blended in here already. And I might take a little of this out right now, just because I think I have layers where I can blend it in later. I have a truck back there I'm going to have to get rid of. All sorts of fun stuff on this shot. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back out. Fit to screen. If you double tap this hand tool, it will put you on fit to screen, which is something I use quite a bit, and a good little trick if you don't know how to use it. So what I've done here is you can see how I was getting a pretty fierce reflection. I've got an umbrella back here with the silk on it. It's kind of lighting this main shot. But just from the curvature of this chair, it's getting a pretty fierce reflection on it. So what these layers are doing is killing that reflection. I must have moved the light. Just for a lighting setup on this too, going back to here, our original. So I've got an umbrella back here with a silk on it, lighting the main shot. I've got this silk up here in the window with a light outside the window, kind of lighting all of this dining room area. There's another umbrella on a stand up here in the hallway, mimicking the light that was coming from a window up here in the hallway. And I have that little softbox that you just saw me lighting this window with is back here, mimicking the light coming from the door. If I go up to my ambience and I am to click onto this, you can kind of see the natural light is following pretty much where I put all those lights. I'm just putting in a cleaner version of that light and a color correct version. You can see all these color shifts I'm getting from the ambient, from the warmth on the ceiling, the coolness on this wall and underneath this table, and the reflections on the table. We're getting the blue from the sky in here, and just a lot of warmth kicking around in here from the sun coming through that front door. So it's not making a very clean ambient shot, is why we use the strobes here. So I'm going to turn that back off, and I'm going to go back to what we had going here, and I am going to paint out this reflection. I'm not going to paint it all out because I do want some of it in there. So I'm going to go about a 40% opacity again. And I do have this on a normal layer. And I'm just going to paint some of the color, the richness back in here, so you can tell that that's wood. And I might just paint in the whole thing here almost at 100%. And then what I can do is dial back this opacity to bring back a little bit of that. I think about 80%. Feels pretty good on that. So now I've got that chair without the reflection. Let's see what I was trying to do here. Okay, so this is for underneath the table. You can see I was losing the detail down in here. So I just moved that strobe down a little bit. And I'm just going to throw this on as a lighten layer. And what this will do is, remember, angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. So I've got a light down here on the other side of the table from down low, hitting into here, which is reflecting back into the camera and giving us just a little separation down in this table. So here's that on and off, or off and on. And as you can see, now we get a little bit of that wood texture in there, and it separates that table out enough to know that it is kind of hollow down there instead of just a black hole pit. So we might add a little bit of this brighter one in there too, just to get a little bit more in there. Okay, so this one is going to be, let's see, I'm standing over there with the strobe. And it looks like I was trying to hit the front side of this plant here, just to mimic the window, since the light that was out there was not hitting that very much. So I'm just going to paint some more of this in, just to give that a little bit of pop. There's a little bit brighter version. I'm going to go with the 30% opacity and just give that plant there a little bit of pop. Maybe these chairs a little bit. And I have one more there, but I don't think, maybe we'll give it a little bit more on these flowers, or fake plant, I should say. Okay, so there's all of our strobe layers. It's looking pretty good. We've got some shadows and things here going on. I might try and dim down what we're getting up here just a little bit. So I'm going to paint very softly some of this dimmer version of the strobe we had. I'm going to just so that's not in a little bit, maybe up here a little dimmer. Okay, so that's looking pretty good for our strobes. Again, it's not perfect, doesn't need to be yet, because we're going to add in our ambient here. So I'm going to take my strobe layer, and I'm just going to do this, show you guys the slow version of it. But if I right click it, strobe layer again, and then what I want to do is flatten this group, so now it's its own image. And I'm going to turn this into a color layer. So now by having this as a color layer, I can move it up above these strobes, and it's going to tame the colors that I have in the rest of this. So if I turn on this, you can now see when I turn it off, all these color artifacts come in from the warmth up here in the ambient before. But now with the color layer, everything's been neutralized. I don't have the blues reflecting out of here. I don't have the warmth reflecting as much out of here. I should have probably blocked off this little sun thing when we were there at the shoot. I think this was one of the last shots of the day, and I just missed that. So we'll take care of it in post. It's okay. But going back to the color layer, you can see how much it helps, especially in this ceiling, having that color layer. So now that I've got that color layer up there, I'm going to start going through here, and I'm going to start blending in the ambient to give it a more sense of realism in here, so it doesn't look so strobed. So again, I always take my darkest layer, you can see here, and I turn it on to a screen layer, and it adds a little bit of glow to the whole shot. You can see how it kind of like pops just a little bit of these shadows. If that one's a little too dim, I can go to the next brightest one. And all these are full stop brackets. So I kind of like how that's giving the room a little bit of pop. And the windows are looking good. They're not blown out or anything. But I like how that feels. It just gave it a little bit, again, of a little ambient glow in my midtones and my shadows. So now from there, I can start clicking on. Now you see when I get to this exposure, if I turn that off, that's about this exposure. It's starting to affect my windows. You can see those houses going a little bit too bright. Maybe the windows are starting to go a little bit too bright. But I want a little bit of that to come through, because I don't want to see those houses looking as dark as they are right now. So I'm going to do this at a 50% opacity. I'm going to paint that in. I'm going to go to a 20%. Maybe paint in some of these skies, because I don't need them as dark as they are. That looks pretty good. Now you're seeing how we're getting some of this glow up here in the windowsills from the ambient light. as I turn that on and off. I'm also getting a little bit more reflection here in these woods, and I want to pull that in. So I'm going to go to lighten here, turn that into a lighten layer, get my brush down low here. Again, I'm using a Wacom tablet, so it's a little bit easier for me to kind of get in here and do this just by pressure sensitivity. I don't need to get my brush exact. If you don't have a Wacom pen, I highly suggest getting one and just getting used to the pressure sensitivity. It saves you a lot of time from having to change brush sizes constantly. So we're just going to paint this in here. I'm going to paint in a little bit of this reflection underneath here. That looks pretty good. Now we go brighter again, and I'm starting to get some of this reflection in the wood down here, which I like, bringing in some of that natural feel. It's bringing in a little bit more down here and a little bit more into those windowsills. So I'm just going to, again, bring in some of this, bring in a little bit there, and I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go 80% and start painting in some more of these windowsills. And you might start to see something come in here on the curtains as well. Looks like maybe not yet. So I do have this distraction here from before on this wood, which I might want to go back through here and see if I ever did get rid of that. So I do have some frames that don't have it as dominant on there. See, I think that's looking better. So what I might do is go back and duplicate my brightest version of that layer. I'm going to delete the layer mask. I'm going to turn this to normal. So as you can see, there's where that reflection was from when that light was shooting through the window. Here's me bouncing it there and getting rid of that. So I'm going to keep this as a normal layer, and I'm going to paint this out at about a 50%. Maybe go over it one more time. That way it still looks like that window is reflecting onto there, but it's not as distracting as it was. As you can see, it was blown out. Kind of your eye went to it. Now it's really subtle. So another reason why I kind of keep my layers going, I don't flatten anything while I'm editing, because you never know when you need to go back to it. Okay, so I've got that, and as you can see here, now we're getting into the brighter ambient layers, and it's really starting to fill things up. It's filling in the ceilings, a little bit more of this floor. So we're going to go back here, and I'm going to again turn that to lighten. And I'm going to do these about 20% opacity. And I'm just going to kind of use my discretion as far as how much of this natural I want coming in here. And again, the more natural I have coming in here, the more natural it's going to feel and not as strobed. But if you get too much, it can get a little washed out and not have the same drama or directional light that maybe you're looking for. So I'm going to shrink that down a little bit, turn that off and on. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Get some of this natural feel in here. And now this next one, now it's coming in here with a lot. But I like what it's doing here on the floor. It's kind of getting rid of some of the shadow stuff that I had going on. I'm getting my curtains in here a little bit. And you can see now this windowsill here, I'll be able to get rid of that distraction that I had from where the light was coming through the silk. And I can add a little bit more of this reflection into the table too. So again, I'm at 20% still here. Get these paintings going a little bit. Maybe get that curtain. I'm going to see if I can't just paint this distraction out of here. That went a little hot on the curtain. I switched back to black, and I'm going to paint this back out of just this curtain, just so I hold some detail in there. Okay, I'm switching back to white and painting in. I'm going to switch to 10% now and just kind of fill in some more of these areas. This is when I go back through the strobes and I turn them down to about 85 to 90. And now it's looking like it's a very natural shot. Again, here was 100%, where it still looks kind of strobed, a little bit real estate-y. By dropping that opacity down, it's letting more of that ambient come through, less of the strobe, and it's starting to look a little bit more natural in here. You might be saying, hey, it looks a little flat right now. There's not a lot of separation. Again, I do want this to look as realistic as possible. not overly processed, but we'll do some more processing back in Capture One when we go back to it to add some punch to these. So I think that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go back here to my strobes, and I like to just click on and off layers just to see if there's anything I don't need. So I'm going to go back to black on my brush, and I'm going to paint out some of this brighter floor. I don't think we need it to be brighter now that we have the ambient. We don't need the ceiling as bright as it was. Again, I'm going to click it on and off. Maybe this little portion of the book. I'm at 10% here, so I'm going to go up to 40% and just paint some of this out. So I'm not painting. But again, I want my focus to be kind of on the sofa, this room back here. So I'm going to get rid of where some of the strobe was coming in a little bit brighter. I'm going to click on and off this darken. That looks good. This is where our silk was. That looks good. This was me darkening down that curtain a little bit. Or no, this was brightening it. Brightening that window frame. And that, so now that I'm looking at it, I don't need it as much as it is. So I'm going to drop the opacity down to 70%. Those curtains were getting a little bright. It's still getting a little bit bright on this window frame for me, so I'm going to go down to like 30%. That looks pretty good. Here's where we had the reflection on the table. Still keeping that out of there. Here was the reflection on the chair. It looks like I can deal with maybe having a little bit more of that back in there. Not too. This was for the flowers on the table. I'm actually going to turn off that brightest one just because it looks more natural that way. So I think we've got a pretty good base here with our strobes and with our ambient. So we've got those two taken care of now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the strobe layer, the window layer, and my color layer. And again, I have a hot button set up for this, but it's just going to take all of those and create a color layer out of those again. Otherwise, you would just select all three of them, duplicate them, merge the group together, and turn it into a color layer. And I'm going to put it above the lights here. So with my lights, you'll see I start pretty dim on these. I think this is a 1,000th of a second. And you can see the chandelier lights here and the can lights. What I'm going to do there is I'm going to put those as a screen layer. So I'm going to put a full mask over that and switch this mode to screen. And I'm going to go back to my brush. I'm going to switch it back to white. And I'm going to do these at 100% opacity and just paint them in here. The builders like to see their lights and all of that. It looks like one of the lights, nope, it came on here. These two lights came on here. So these ones are my next exposure brighter. I'm going to do them at 100% here as a lighten layer, not as a screen layer. Again, the screen layer kind of takes that darkest one and just kind of gives it a little glow. What I didn't have was my color layer on. So here, let's do this one. I'm going to do these at like 30%. Get rid of these dark rims around the can lights here. I think this one's okay. So you can see when I turn my color layer on, it makes them perfectly white like they were. When I turn it off, they get overly warm. So that's kind of why I like to do my lights on the separate layer, is I can create a mask with just these. I'm going to paint it over at 100% and just paint over these lights. And now I can dial this back to wherever I want. So if I want them really warm, I can go down to 20, 25%. If I want it somewhere in the middle, maybe it's at 50%. That still looks a little warm to me. I like them maybe around 75, 80%. So there's still a little bit of warmth coming out of them. They don't look like daylight bulbs, but they're not as distracting because there's a little warmth out of them. So you can see here, if I go up in my brighter exposures, it's making these quite a bit brighter. I might want to do these at just a 1 or a 10% opacity just to bring some of that glow in there. And again, with the lights, I kind of do them the same as the strobes and just pull them back a little bit, 85%. So it looks realistic still within the frame. I'm still not liking the windows here. Oh, actually, it turned off all my window layers when we did that before. So there's our windows back. You can see with the masks on, And I think we had, yep, that one is our screen layer as well. I don't know why that is not working as a screen layer right now, so we're going to turn that off. Something happened there within Photoshop. But we've got, these ones are all doing their job. Let me try and do this again. Why is this? That's a light and screen. Interesting. I'm not sure why that's not working like it was. Normally that should work fine. Photoshop's having a glitch right now, so we're not going to worry about it. But I still have some issue here in this lamp that I need to get taken care of. It's not looking real enough for me. So I'm going to paint in a little bit of that. I'm going to go back to 20%. I'm going to paint a little bit of this house out because I don't want to see it. And that's a good thing about having these different ambient layers too, is maybe you don't want to see this stuff out the windows and you kind of want that whitewashed window look. You can just paint in some of your ambient layer to where you're not having to mask around these branches and everything. As you can see, it got a little bit too bloomy around these branches, so I'm going to paint some of that back out. Go back here. I just don't want this blooming on these branches as much as it's doing, or on the side of the window here. I'm just going to paint some of that out. But it gives you a lot of versatility here. Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of this video. So I didn't want you to have to sit there and watch me clone everything out of this shot. So as you can see, here was all the clone layers. I just took out, you know, some of the light switches, cans, that reflection here in the ceiling that I didn't like with that speaker. Took out the speaker and a few other little distractions. This car back here, got rid of the truck. You know, your normal cleanup things that you would do to a photo. So I've got it pretty much dialed in there. It is now ready to save. So what I'm going to do is save this file as a PSB, which is a large file, basically a large layered file. They take a little bit longer to save, but again, it's that non-destructive editing that I was talking about earlier. So I'm going to save these as a large document format. I'm just going to take this file name that I have here, and I'm just going to call it Living Dining. So I'm going to save that so I have the non-destructive information there. For any means, if I need to go back to it, the client's not happy about the blend, I don't have to redo the whole shot. I can just go back to this layered PSB file and make minor tweaks without having to redo the entire shot. So give me a minute for this to save, and we'll be right back. Okay, so that PSB is now done saving. I am just going to flatten the whole image. Again, I have a hotkey set up for this. Otherwise, you would just select all the layers, do flatten image, and I am now going to save this as a TIFF, and I have a working folder for each of those, for my PSBs and for my TIFFs. I save them in their own folders so I can have them later to access if I need to. But I'm just going to save this one as a TIFF. That saves very quick, and then I'm going to go back here into Capture One, and I've got these all within an edits folder here. Give me a second. So I've got these here now in edits, and I can go to this particular shot, and this is why I like bringing things back into Capture One, is because you can do your final tweaks to it after you've done through Photoshop. So I'm going to apply just a little random special sauce that I do to all my photos for post-processing. Does a little bit of contrast, exposure, things like that. Probably brings down the oranges a little bit in case the floors go a little bit orange. You can come up with your own recipe here for whatever you like or whatever works best with your camera. Every camera and lens combination is going to be a little bit different. So I would suggest, you know, messing around with these sliders a little bit based on your processing and just see what works as kind of a global adjustment. It adds a couple presets I have here as well. Some filters, style filters that I got from Capture One, and it does those opacity just a little bit. And from here, I usually go in just to my base layer and I just do a auto adjust levels. That does a really good job of pulling in the blacks and the whites here to give it some punch. So the shot looks pretty good right now. I have another look that I sometimes put on things, which is through Match Look, which is another preset I've kind of developed on here, which gives you kind of that sepia tone look. It's a little much at 100%, but I do like it maybe at 20%. And you can see how that just adds a little bit of contrast, a little bit of warmth in there. Maybe even at 30, it's looking pretty good. Just adds a little bit of that warmth in there. So now what I can do with Capture One is another reason I like this program, is I can add another layer here. And I can go into these gradient filters. Maybe this couch wasn't getting enough pop before. So now I can just kind of play with these gradient filters and boost that up a little bit and make that couch just come in here a little bit more by adding a little bit of and brightness to it. You know, maybe I want a little bit more here on this table as well. Not too much, but again, just to make it pop a little bit. I'll come in here and add just a touch of exposure and brightness. But you can see how just those two little adjustments kind of made the shot come to life. So those are with it off. Here's brightening up that couch. Here's brightening up that table. And that's really all it needed to kind of bring my eye back here to the foreground, whereas everything before was looking pretty even in tonality, I guess I would say. One last thing I might do, and again, this all goes back to non-destructive editing. I'm not doing all these on the main image layer. I'm adding layers here so I can turn these on and off, and I can adjust the opacity on these to my liking to really get them dialed in just how I want. So work in layers as much as you can on all of your workflow, so you can always go back to it, and you know, you can even go really drastic with things if you want to. If I wanted to really boost this up and just see, oh, actually it looks pretty good when I do boost it up. And if I go to this one, maybe I crank the exposure on this sofa. It gets a little bright, but maybe I bring it back just a little bit and really play with those sliders and just see where you might want it. Because you might be surprised that you might want to move it past where you normally think you would. I think that's looking pretty good. You can kind of see how this window's getting affected by that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to move it below that other one, and I'm going to select this window, and I'm just going to crank back these whites. And you can see there, maybe that's a little too much, so I'm going to back off on that a little bit. And again, I can go up to this other layer, and if I just don't want it affecting that, I can just go up here to the erase tool and I can shrink that down, and I can just make sure, it can ask me to rasterize the layer, but I can just make sure that I am not affecting that so it doesn't blow it out within this layer mask, and that looks better. And now I can kind of double check this and see if it's where I want it. It might be a little bit overdone, so I'm just going to go back here to like 50%. And the other last thing I kind of like to do on these is a Luma curve on them. So if you don't know about Luma curves, basically it's only affecting the tonalities of the image without affecting the colors. If you do a normal RGB curve adjustment, it's going to shift your colors. As you can see, if I start messing with these on a curve, it's going to, oh, I have to invert the mask here, sorry. So everything, but you can see how it starts to affect the colors, especially how this wood floor comes a little bit more in, so I'm just going to reset that. And I'm going to go back here to Luma, and I can click on this, and maybe I want these walls to be a little bit brighter. I want this floor to be a little bit more rich. I can go in here and I can tweak these, but it doesn't affect the color now. See how that color, even if I crank this down, it just keeps that rich kind of wood tone to it without affecting the color. So use those Luma curves, because you're going to find that you get a lot of good contrast out of them without shifting your colors too much. So here's with that off, looked a little flat and hazy. Little Luma curve on there really gave it some punch and some life. The last thing I might do is one more adjustment layer here. And if you go into these color bounce sliders, you can really get some dial in the warmth. You can see my highlights here. Sorry, again, I gotta invert the mask, make sure you can see it. But you can see how the highlights really go warm. You can move this around, you can shift these colors a little bit. I usually add just a tiny bit of warmth in my highlights and my midtones. I think the shadows are okay on this one, but again, there's with it off, here's with it on. Just gives us a little bit more of that warm kind of morning feel to it. So if you haven't used Capture One, I highly suggest it. Like I said, I've got 5 layers here in addition to the match look going and a matte finish and a black layer. So I've got quite a few additional layers here. And if I show you the original, so there's the original where we came out of Photoshop to where we are now. And you can see there's a lot of good things that happen there by just switching or doing a couple sliders and layers within Capture One. Again, there's the original and there's our final product. And again, maybe I don't want that warmth to be as much as it is, so I can just dial it back because I've got non-destructive layers going here. I think that looks pretty good. I think that feels a lot better than where we started, which was here. Felt a little cool, a little drab, and now we've got what I would consider to be a good final image that looks very natural and non-real estate edit looking. And you can do this with any shot. The formula works every time. So hopefully that was helpful. We'll see you on the next video. Thanks.